So I made a video where I ranked every generation of My Little Pony. I gave G3 a low 5, just above Pony Life. This wasn't too surprising at the time, since G3 has a rep in the fandom for being terrible.
Oh, they're not so bad.
But I should say that when I made that video, I had only seen the first half or so of G3 up to A Very Minty Christmas. Now I've gotten the completionist cape and watched every single official animation of My Little Pony that I am aware of existing. So I wanted to put in some additional thoughts about G3. Is it, in my opinion, terrible? The answer may shake you to your core. No, it's not terrible. I thought it was terrible, but it grew on me over time.
Like a fungus.
It also seemed to increase in quality over time, at least up until the reboot in 2008. For example, one of my least favorite G3 animations is the very first one, A Charming Birthday, and one of my favorites is one of the last ones, Come Back Lily Lively. I will say that in 2008 they finally decided to fix Rainbow Dash, who previously was one of the most annoying characters in the show. But 2008 onwards, pretty much every animation is centered on a party, so that gets old fast. That's one of the biggest problems with the show right there. The characters spend too much time giggling and throwing parties. They don't seem to really have any responsibilities, even though I think they're technically adults. Really, I think G3 is the closest MLP ever got to mirroring how a little girl would play with these toys. That's kind of how the show is written. So then, why did I say it's not terrible? Well, there's this stretch from about 2005 to 2007, where in addition to the occasional party, stuff actually happened. Like, the stories had conflict and tension in them. What G3 did quite well was fantasy slice of life. It didn't have scary villains constantly threatening the pony's survival, but it still had meaningful conflict and tension, at least in some of the specials. It often used magical elements of the world to enhance the story and create a conflict that was important to the characters' lives, even if the stakes didn't involve the whole world. If this sounds familiar, it should, because it's what G4 is built off of. G4 combines the slice of life of G3 with the adventure elements of G1, but it certainly leans more heavily into the slice of life. And frankly, some of the most adventure-intensive parts of G4 are kind of boring. Like, how many different times is the story going to default to "The fate of all of Equestria hangs in the balance"? I don't give a darn about the fate of Equestria because most of the premieres and finales get so distracted with the plot and magic and lore that they forget about the characters. For example, I don't give a darn what Discord can make the ponies do. I want to know what they're doing when they have their own free will. I want to know how Rarity and Sweetie Belle's relationship progresses, or how Pinkie Pie manages to balance all her different friendships, or how Scootaloo will deal with her insecurities. This is the heart of the show. And this kind of storytelling really started in G3. Let's take Come Back Lily Lively as an example. Lily Lively is a unicorn whose horn shines when she laughs. She can't control it, and none of the other unicorns do it, so it makes her feel different, and she's very self-conscious about it. It's implied that she's been suppressing her emotions for years, and when she finally snaps, she runs away. Later, she decides to finally stop hiding what makes her special and shine on. This episode really reminds me of the main attraction. In the same sort of way, Rara was hiding a part of who she was, and when she finally let it shine, it was beautiful. For the record, both of these episodes made me cry. There are other things that make G3 a charming show. I grew to like a lot of the characters. Minty is legendary. Thistle Whistle is adorable, Zipsy is a bean, and of course there's poor Lily Lively. I had previously stated Thistle Whistle to be my favorite character in G3, but since she rarely showed up after a Very Minty Christmas and Minty went on to get some additional development, I think OG Sock Pone has taken her place as best pony. One thing that really helps make the characters come alive is the voice actors. G3 features some talented voices who later appeared in G4, including Tabitha St. Germain, Kathy Wesseluck, and Andrea Libman. Some of the other voice actors are really good as well, and it helps make the ponies more endearing. Along with that, I love the songs in G3. They're up to a much higher standard than G1, and some of them are even as good as G4. I will say that the instrumental music isn't quite as good as G1, which is pretty typical for the eras they're in. G1 was made when people hired out whole orchestras to make soundtracks for the show, and by the time of G3, the convention had shifted towards using fewer instruments like in G4. I also like the art style of G3. It moves more smoothly than G1, although it still has some funky moments. I think it has some of the most beautiful backgrounds that My Little Pony has ever featured. The G3 ponies are pretty cute, although they're more anthropomorphized than in G1, and they all have the same main style, so there's some room for improvement. Overall, I don't think the G3 style is quite as charming as the G1 style, but I'll still take it over G4 and their oversized eyes. Seriously, their heads are so huge, but even so, there's no room for their brains! Plus, the backgrounds in G3 are definitely more detailed than in G4. So I've actually defended G3 quite a bit. Is it a good show? Well, not exactly. It's still very preschool, and it's especially a shock to your system when you're first watching it. Like, really? This is what My Little Pony used to be? But it grows on you over time.
Like a fungus.
It's cute and fun and magical. A lot of the things that make G4 good, they're already doing here. I actually wouldn't move its place in my ranking of the generations. Number 4 was My Little Pony Tales, and that show was definitely better written than G3. However, previously I had said that G3 narrowly beat number 6, Pony Life, and that there was a huge gap between G3 and Ponytails. Now I'd go the other way. I'd say there's a huge gap between G3 and Pony Life, with Ponytails narrowly beating G3. I actually had to sit down and think about this one for a while before deciding which of the two I liked more, due to G3's advantage in music, art, and the inclusion of fantasy elements. So there you go. I just made a video defending G3. Have I lost my status as a brony?